Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Ahsoka episode 7. This is the penultimate episode of the season. Hopefully it is season 1 of 2 or 3 or maybe just not a mini series. I really hope they continue the show because I've been absolutely loving it so far. And there's a lot that happened in this episode. Of course, it being the penultimate episode, everything has kind of led up to this point. Things are finally converging in a way that we've been waiting for things to converge in this series. And we have one episode left. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about everything that happened here in this episode, which was a very heavy action-centric episode, and how that is going to lead into the finale of the show and how I think this series is going to end. So this will, of course, be a spoiler review, so if you've not seen episode 7 yet, go check it out, then come back and let's just talk about it. So last episode ended off with Sabine finally reuniting with Ezra, along with the introduction of Thrawn into the series to see how he plans to escape this galaxy to go back to the main one, to try to re-spark the Empire in our main galaxy, while Ahsoka was slowly heading her way over through the Purrgil. And now we have Ahsoka finally arriving here in this new galaxy, and you get to see Thrawn enact his plan, which I think anybody who is new to this series that hasn't seen Clone Wars or Rebels, to see Thrawn's plan be enacted in the meticulous way that he enacts his plans is so great to see. And Thrawn has always had a lot of great plans of kind of letting the heroes do their thing and getting to a certain point and letting them go at just the right time for them to be able to get what he wants by the end of it. And I think this really does explore exactly how Thrawn's mind works, exactly how his plots kind of fit together in a way that is so satisfying by the end of whatever arc that he is in. And it is everything I wanted Thrawn to be in this series. The last episode ended off with Thrawn essentially saying that he's going to attack these Purrgil as soon as they get out of hyperspace, with absolute prejudice, without any sort of mercy whatsoever. And that's exactly what you get as soon as Ahsoka arrives from hyperspace. And it's a great moment because as soon as they get out of hyperspace and they hear all these explosions and all these rumblings, and they can't see exactly what's happening except for seeing like flashes of light through the teeth of the Purrgil, until they finally fly out of it, and it's absolute chaos with this minefield and all these bombs moving directly towards anything that flies in their path. And it was a great sequence. And I think another great part about this episode is how it doesn't necessarily play off exact same beats as what was in the original Star Wars trilogy, but it has plenty of homages to the original trilogy in a lot of fun ways. And I think this reminded me a lot of the asteroid sequence in Empire Strikes Back, especially when she goes into the ring around the planet with all the dead carcasses of other Purrgil, which was an absolute exhilarating sequence. I think that this season in general has had a lot of great space battles in Star Wars that I absolutely love to see, but see Ahsoka maneuvering through all these things, and Thrawn saying, okay, let's kind of back off at this point, and as soon as she settles and as soon as she thinks that she is safe, we're going to try to bombard her one more time. It was a great plan on Thrawn's end, and it really did stall for time as much as he needed to. And on the Sabine side of things with Ezra, of course, you have a lot of people complaining with the last episode of Sabine not exactly telling Ezra everything that is going on, because obviously, us as the audience, we know that there's a very small amount of time until Thrawn can make his escape and get back to the main galaxy, which is the whole point in why they are here, to try to stop him from returning. And Sabine seems to have a complete lack of urgency when it comes to this. And I was thinking, okay, have your little reunion, and I think off camera she's going to explain everything to Ezra so he's back up to speed. And I thought we got that in this episode when he's like, okay, so the Empire fell, there's this new republic, and oh, you still haven't told me how you got here or what our plan is to escape or anything like that. I'm like, okay, now it's time to be annoyed with Sabine, because I thought they're just going to kind of do that off camera so we don't have to, waste some screen time with having to explain these things. But maybe in the next episode, Ezra will be all caught up. And honestly, I kind of want, as soon as he finds out, to be a little bit upset at Sabine, because, I mean, come on, girl, you got so much time to be able to get out of this situation. I get from a certain point with her character where her decision to go find Ezra was against the will of Ahsoka, was against all the good, ideas of what they were supposed to do to try to stop them from ever being able to let Thrawn escape in any sort of way. And there is guilt in that, and there is a decision that she made that was a wrong decision in a lot of ways, even though it is kind of powered by her care and her love for this friend of hers. And I really want to see that idea explored, and not just a way where Ezra finds out and they just kind of enact their plan to try to stop Thrawn. I want not necessarily some sort of consequences for her, but I want her to kind of face that decision that she made and the good things that came out of it and the bad things that come out of that decision. Try to have some either inner conflict or outer conflict with the other characters around her because of that decision. And if that doesn't happen, then I think that this whole decision with how they treated Sabine in this season is going to be fairly frustrating. It is starting to get frustrating. I think in terms of this series, have been a little bit easy on these sort of things. At the beginning of the series, a lot of people had felt this disconnect between Sabine and Ahsoka that I didn't necessarily feel at first until, the episodes kind of continued on and those beats and those conversations became a little bit repetitive, and it didn't seem to push the arcs forward as much as I wanted it to, or as much as I desired the show to do. And I still kind of pushed it off as, okay, let's wait till the end of the season to see if this finally does resolve. But when Ahsoka and Sabine reunite in this episode after Sabine essentially thinking that Ahsoka died, there was, I guess, a moment where you're supposed to feel something for these characters being reunited, but I felt so much more when Ahsoka, reunited with Ezra after all this time, because they have had a lot of great moments in Rebels kind of working together in a lot of fun ways. And so that connection, and even when Sabine met, up with Ezra, I felt that connection a lot because those characters had that backstory and had that history. But because of the lack of history in the training between Ahsoka and Sabine that all happened off camera, there is really a disconnect in there, and I was still hoping on seeing some flashbacks, like when Ahsoka was calling out to Sabine in this episode, trying to locate her location, and I was hoping that maybe you'd see some flashes and see a connection that they have that is greater than what we've seen on screen this season so far, but we didn't get that. Now, with all that being said, I absolutely love the dynamic between Sabine and Ezra. Everything about these two characters coming back on screen, it just works for me. Maybe it's because of that pre-established connection that I have between those characters and the animated show, but I do think that these actors are working pretty well together, and there are action sequences in this episode where they're, kind of traveling with all these little crab creatures, and then the wolves come on with Shin leading this charge, which I'll get into Shin and Baylan in a second here. But once that entire encounter happens and Ezra was like, okay, no, you keep the saber, you've been training with it, you should know how to use it. I have been, on this planet for a long time without this lightsaber. I know how to utilize the Force in a way that is beneficial to him, and that's exactly what he shows in this episode, which at first I was like, no, just give him the lightsaber. I want to see Ezra with the lightsaber swinging around and doing all those cool things, even though I did see a wall of lightsaber in Sabine or in Ahsoka's ship, so I'm sure that they'll get their due in the finale of this season. But I love that Ezra was kind of doing all these things on his own, and he was stopping Shin's lightsaber with the Force, and it showed a kind of, I guess, evolution of how he is as a Jedi, to a point where he doesn't need a weapon that can slash and cut things in half. He can just use his own power and his own ability and his own, I guess, connection with the Force to be able to defend himself in a way that a Jedi should, which I absolutely love what they did with his character in terms of that. And it's funny, I wrote a little Star Wars short film in college because of the fun of just writing a script like that, and in my script I had, one of the Jedi stopping a lightsaber using the Force, which at that point hadn't been seen in Star Wars at all, and so it being in Rise of Skywalker just a couple months after I wrote that script was like, dang, they took my idea. And Star Wars has been really utilizing that a lot in their shows and in their movies recently, which I absolutely love that in general. And so everything with Ezra so far, I absolutely love, and Sabine's connection with him, I am on board with. It's just there's something about Sabine's arc, and I just want to see that decision that she makes that was integral to the entire season that got us here in this situation in the first place. I want to see that be confronted head on. Now let's get into Baylan and Shin in this episode, because I think everybody can universally agree that they are easily the greatest parts of this show up until this point. I love their dynamic. I love how they kind of interact with each other, and I love the intrigue of trying to figure out what in the world Baylan's plan is, because I thought in this episode we'd get some sort of motivation or why he wanted to come to this galaxy in the first place, and we still have not figured that out. And it's one of those aspects of the show that I think is entirely unpredictable. I think there's a few clear directions that the show is going to go. I do think that Thrawn is going to make his escape back to the main galaxy to kind of lead up to, hopefully, in Ahsoka Season 2 or Mandalorian Season 4, or I guess leading up to the movie that Dave Filoni is going to be directing, with all of these characters in theaters, which I cannot wait for. And so I do think Thrawn needs to escape by the end of this season in order to leave a cliffhanger ending, a more dour ending, whether or not, Ahsoka and Sabine and Ezra end up trapped in this other galaxy, not being able to follow him. I think that is one possibility, or they're going to escape along with him, which I do think that they can get back with the Purgle possibly, but there are other ways to escape out of this galaxy. But I do think that would be a good ending to end with Thrawn escaping and them being trapped on this planet. I do think that is a clear path to how the series is going to end in general, but really I have no idea, not a single clue what in the world Baylan is up to on this. And it's gotten to a point where, again, I thought we were going to find out some answers a little bit sooner on in this series, because we have one more episode left, and knowing that Ray Stevenson has sadly passed away, I do want this character to move on, to continue on in a possible season 2, because I find this character and the writing for this character, and especially the dynamics between Shin and Baylan, so fascinating. This gray Jedi aspect, whether or not, he's in this other galaxy, not to seek power to, kind of go on with the Empire like Shin desires to do, but to rather maybe stay in this galaxy and start his own order using the Force in this new galaxy and starting his own thing separate from everything else. And I do think that is a possibility. I heard some people talking about that, which I do think is a good idea, but I want this character to be explored more. And if it's just the finale episode, and if he is taken out like villains normally have, they are normally taken out in Star Wars in this sort of way, if he is taken out, I guess I need to be satisfied by whatever his plan was and whether or not it was worth to stop. But if his character wasn't written and fated to, end his arc here in this show itself, which it seems like they are actually planning on continuing on with this character in some sort of way, because I just can't see them wrapping everything up in this finale with Baylan and everything that he's trying to do, especially since we haven't gotten an explanation up until this point, along with everything with Thrawn and them trying to stop him from escaping. I don't see them being able to, I guess, close out all those pages all in the last episode alone. And so if they were planning on continuing with this character, that absolutely just sucks even more that Ray Stevenson won't be able to continue as his character, because he really does bring so much to the role. Just everything in his performance, you can feel that history that he is both appreciative of and learned so much from and kind of reviles in some sort of way. And so everything with this character and his dynamic with Shin, I think it was a very interesting choice for him to say, okay, you seek this power with the Empire, you go on, you kill Ezra and Sabine in the way that Thrawn kind of wants you to, so you can build yourself up in this world. If you want power, that is a path that you are on, and I'm going on my own path, which, a master to an apprentice, I think being in that open way where it's like, okay, now it's up to you to make the decision of where you want your life to go. And when Shin is defeated in this final battle in this episode, and she kind of has a decision to either, I guess, surrender to Ahsoka or to run off on her own, she decides to run off on her own. So I wonder if she's going to go back to Baylan and kind of, rather than seek that power with Thrawn, and kind of seeing how she was being used in a certain way, and how, yes, they sent out some, I guess, forces to try to help her in some sort of way, but they ended up fleeing. They stopped helping her in order to kind of, serve their own purposes. And so does this Empire, does Thrawn really care about these characters? Which clearly, as an audience, we know that he doesn't. But what does Shin now think of the Empire and of this plan that she wanted to pursue versus what, I guess, Baylan was trying to teach her in this entire time? And like I said, there's a lot of directions that this finale can go that is very much expected. It is the direction that we all kind of assume that this show is going to go with its finale, and so we can all expect those sort of things. But again, Shin and Baylan are such wild cards in this story that was so wildly unexpected from an audience member going into this, being introduced to these two characters that are shrouded in so much mystery that even up until the finale episode, we still haven't learned exactly what Baylan's goal is. And so I find it absolutely fascinating. I really hope that it has enough payoff in the finale to make it all worth it. And I guess the last thing that I didn't talk about in this episode, well, I guess two things. There's Anakin once again, in a little hologram message, trying to, train Ahsoka to go against these, I guess, greater forces. Like Asajj Ventress got a little shout out. Count Dooku, of course, got a shout out. Grievous got a shout out in this little sequence, which of course having Hayden Christensen in any sort of way appear in this is always great to see. But also you have the whole thing with Hera and Mon Mothma on, the New Republic side of things. And again, all this stuff is fascinating to me. I know some people are kind of over it in terms of it's, having that bureaucracy that is so focused on, I guess, the established what is here and now versus the threats that is kind of impossible to see in certain ways. And this one senator is for sure an Imperial still. I don't trust this guy at all. And in order for the First Order to rise in the way that it does, you do need, I guess, an established Senate, an established government that is going to be willing to switch back over on a whim, which I think is very much clearly going to happen later on in the future of this whole thing leading up to the sequel trilogy. And so all the pieces are there, and I do find these conversations, this political side, more interesting than what the prequels did. And of course, C-3PO making a little cameo. Of course, C-3PO has to be in the show. C-3PO is pretty much in every single Star Wars whatever that has ever existed ever. And of course, Leia Organa sending this message over. I'm glad they didn't do the CGI thing with her, instead sending C-3PO to say that she, okayed this mission from Hera to go follow, to pursue this threat of Thrawn returning. I do think that is a good way for her to get out of the situation that she is in a way that does pre-establish that Leia is still out there doing her thing as a senator in this world that is greater than just the Ahsoka, Thrawn storyline that is revolving around this show. There is a greater universe out there that is kind of leading the events that we know are happening in the background. So that was all nice to see as well. But I think that is all in this episode that I needed to talk about. And if I didn't stress it enough, I think the direction and the writing and the action in this episode was top notch. I absolutely loved most of that stuff in this episode. And the music, of course, the music has been phenomenal in this show. Every single time I hear the theme, every single time the credits hits and I hear that Ahsoka theme that they have for the show, I just love it, and I kind of bask in the glory of that music throughout the entire credits every single time. So those are my thoughts on Ahsoka episode 7. I cannot wait for the finale next week. So of course, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and comment down below all your thoughts on this episode. And again, if you want to see my reviews for the finale episode, definitely come back to the channel then when I upload that, along with all the horror movies that are coming out here in both September and October. We have Saw X coming out in a few days, so I'll have a review out for that, along with The Creator, which I'm seeing tomorrow, which I'm so incredibly excited to see. The Creator, of course, being tangentially connected to Star Wars, with Gareth Edwards being the director of Rogue One, and so I cannot wait to talk about that film as well. But that's going to be it for me. Like I said, comment down below your thoughts on episode 7 of Ahsoka, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and hope to see you all in my next one.